The bright studio lights of Piers Morgan Uncensored illuminated what would become one of the most explosive live television moments in media history. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sat across from Piers Morgan in his London studio. Her expression calm and composed despite the bombshell she was about to drop on live international television. Morgan, 59, leaned back in his chair with that trademark smirk that had made him famous and infamous. Across 2 continents, he had just finished what he thought was a devastating critique of Crockett's recent congressional hearings, his British accent dripping with condescension as he questioned her grandstanding and attention-seeking behavior. "Congresswoman Crockett," Morgan said, adjusting his tie with theatrical confidence, "surely even you must admit that your recent performances in Congress have been more about building your personal brand than serving the American people." But Piers Morgan had no idea that the script for this interview had already been rewritten. He was about to walk directly into a trap set by one of the sharpest legal minds in American politics. What happened next would send shockwaves through the media world and create the most watched clip in the show's history. Crockett reached into her briefcase and pulled out a legal document, placing it carefully on the table between them. The camera zoomed in on the official seal and bold lettering at the top, United States District Court, Southern District of New York. Then, in a voice steady as steel, Congresswoman Crockett delivered the line that would define a new era of media accountability. "Actually, Piers," she said, her voice unwavering, "I'm here to serve you with something else entirely. You've just been served with a $50 million defamation lawsuit live on your own show." The silence that followed stretched for exactly 4.7 seconds. A mere blink in time, yet long enough for Piers Morgan's face to cycle through a kaleidoscope of emotions, confusion, disbelief, and then pure, unadulterated panic. The clip of his jaw literally dropping would be viewed over 100 million times within 48 hours. His priceless reaction became an instant global phenomenon, a symbol of a powerful figure brought to his knees by the very platform he used to dominate others. To truly grasp the monumental impact of this legal earthquake, we must first understand the titans involved and the escalating conflict that led to this explosive live showdown. Piers Morgan, at 59 years old, had meticulously built his career on controversy and confrontation. Starting as a newspaper editor, he gained widespread fame as a judge on America's Got Talent, and for decades cultivated a brand around being provocative and unfiltered. He was renowned for his sharp wit, his willingness to ask uncomfortable questions, and his undeniable ability to generate headlines. Yet he was equally known for pushing boundaries, often crossing lines that had landed him in serious legal trouble before. His show, Piers Morgan Uncensored on Talk TV, had become his primary battleground, a platform where he regularly launched aggressive attacks on American politicians, particularly progressive Democrats. Morgan made a specialty of bringing on guests he disagreed with, not for genuine debate, but to attempt to embarrass them on live television. His style was aggressive, often interrupting, and specifically designed to make his guests look foolish or unprepared. He cultivated an image of the unflappable interviewer, always in control, always with the upper hand. But Piers Morgan was about to meet his match. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, at just 33 years old, represented Texas's 30th congressional district. She had rapidly become one of the most formidable voices in Congress, known for her sharp intellect and unwavering resolve. What Morgan overlooked, to his peril, was Crockett's critical background. Before her election, she was a civil rights attorney who specialized in media law and defamation cases. This background would prove absolutely crucial. She knew exactly how to build a bulletproof legal case, and she had been quietly, methodically, documenting every false statement Morgan had made about her. Crockett's legal expertise made her particularly dangerous to someone like Morgan. While other politicians might simply brush off media attacks or respond with angry tweets, Crockett understood the precise legal standards for defamation. She had been methodically building a case that would meet every single requirement for a successful lawsuit, a silent and deadly precision that Morgan entirely underestimated. Over the past 6 months, Morgan had made Jasmine Crockett a regular target of his criticism. He dedicated entire segments to mocking her congressional questioning, deriding her as unqualified, grandstanding, and more interested in viral moments than actual governance. But his attacks had recently escalated beyond mere policy criticism, venturing into personal territory that would ultimately prove to be his downfall. The breaking point had come 3 weeks earlier when Morgan aired a segment ominously titled The Jasmine Crockett Problem. In that show, he had made several specific claims about Crockett that definitively crossed the line from opinion into outright false statements of fact. He claimed she had faked her law degree credentials, suggested she was under investigation by congressional ethics committees, and implied she had financial conflicts of interest that she was hiding from voters. Every single one of these claims was patently false, and Congresswoman Crockett had the unequivocal documentation to prove it. More importantly, she had irrefutable evidence that Morgan knew they were false when he made them, the key to winning a defamation case against a public figure. Now that we've met the combatants and understand the history of their simmering conflict, prepare to learn how the stage was meticulously set for one of the most spectacular legal ambushes ever witnessed on live television. The stakes for this confrontation couldn't have been higher. For Morgan, this represented an existential threat to his sprawling media empire. A $50 million lawsuit would be financially devastating, a crippling blow, but the reputational damage could, quite literally, end his career. His brand was built on credibility and a willingness to confront, but this threatened to expose him as a reckless purveyor of lies. For Crockett, this was about more than just money. It was about setting a powerful precedent that media personalities couldn't lie about elected officials with impunity. She was using her specialized legal skills to fight back against a media culture that had become increasingly reckless with the truth, a truth she was prepared to defend with the full force of the law. She had strategically structured her case to be filed in New York, where she had stronger legal protections against defamation, maximizing her advantage in this high-stakes game. This was a fight against a reckless media culture, and the fate of journalistic integrity hung in the balance. The setting for this confrontation, Morgan's own show, was particularly significant and integral to Crockett's masterful plan. Crockett had agreed to appear on Piers Morgan Uncensored under the simple pretense of defending her congressional record. Morgan's producers, driven by the network's struggling ratings and a desire for more provocative content, thought they were getting yet another golden opportunity for their host to publicly embarrass a Democratic politician on live television. Instead, they were about to witness one of the most spectacular legal ambushes in television history. The show was broadcast live from Talk TV's London studios, reaching audiences in the UK and streaming globally. This episode was supposed to be their big moment, a triumphant takedown of a rising Democratic star. The audience for this particular episode was especially significant because it was being simulcast on several major platforms. Sky News was carrying it live in the UK, it was streaming on YouTube to a global audience, and several American cable networks had picked up the feed because of the high-profile guest. The world was watching, unaware they were about to witness a seismic shift. Morgan's confidence going into the interview was palpable. He had spent weeks preparing what he thought were devastating questions about Crockett's record. His research team had compiled clips of her congressional appearances, meticulously looking for moments that could be taken out of context to make her look bad, to dismantle her reputation piece by piece. But what Morgan didn't know was that Crockett had been preparing for this moment much, much longer than he had. She had been working with a team of top defamation lawyers for months, building an airtight case, documenting every detail, and patiently waiting for the perfect moment to strike. This live television appearance was that precise, opportune moment. The legal papers she carried weren't just for show, they represented months of meticulous work, documenting every false statement, every reckless claim, and every instance where Morgan had crossed the line from legitimate criticism into actionable defamation. The international nature of the broadcast also raised the stakes significantly. This wasn't just an American political story or a British media story, it was becoming a global moment that would be analyzed by legal experts, media scholars, and political observers around the world. Morgan thought he was firmly in control, about to add another Democratic scalp to his collection. Instead, he was about to become the victim of his own reckless words and Crockett's unparalleled legal precision. He was walking into a trap he never even conceived. Now, as the cameras rolled and the interview began, witness how Jasmine Crockett meticulously pulled the strings, expertly guiding Piers Morgan into the very legal quagmire he had unknowingly prepared for himself. The interview had started typically for Piers Morgan Uncensored, with Morgan launching into an aggressive opening designed to immediately put his guest on the defensive. The studio's dramatic lighting cast sharp shadows as Morgan leaned forward, his signature confrontational style on full display, his eyes narrowed in anticipation of a verbal sparring match. "Congresswoman Crockett," Morgan began, his British accent sharp with criticism, "let's address the elephant in the room. Your recent congressional performances have been described by many as theatrical grandstanding rather than serious governance. How do you respond to critics who say you're more interested in viral moments than actually serving your constituents?" Crockett had faced this type of questioning countless times before and handled it with practiced ease, her composure unshaken. "Piers," she replied calmly, her voice steady and clear, "I think holding powerful people accountable is exactly what my constituents sent me to Washington to do. When I question witnesses in congressional hearings, I come prepared with facts and evidence. If that makes for compelling television, that's secondary to getting answers for the American people." Morgan wasn't satisfied with this measured response. He had brought Crockett on his show to create a viral moment of his own, to dominate the narrative, and he was prepared to escalate quickly. "But surely you must acknowledge that some of your tactics have been questionable," he pressed, a slight edge entering his voice. "Your confrontation with Justice Alito, for instance. Many legal experts called it inappropriate and disrespectful to the Supreme Court." Crockett barely paused. "Actually, Piers," she replied calmly, a subtle hint of amusement in her tone, "the legal experts I've spoken with praised the thoroughness of my preparation and the appropriateness of my questions. Perhaps you're thinking of political commentators rather than actual legal scholars." This precise correction clearly irritated Morgan, who wasn't used to guests pushing back so effectively, let alone correcting his terminology live on air. His voice took on a sharper, more accusatory edge. "Well, let's talk about your qualifications then," he said, his eyes drilling into her. "You've been in Congress for less than 2 years. You're 33 years old, and yet you position yourself as some sort of expert on constitutional law and government ethics. Don't you think that's rather presumptuous?" The audience, both in the studio and watching globally, could sense the tension building. Morgan's questions were becoming more personal and less focused on policy, a clear tactic to provoke. Crockett, however, maintained her composure, her posture still, but viewers familiar with her style could see a shift, a quiet intensity that suggested she was preparing for something significant. "My qualifications speak for themselves, Piers," she stated firmly, her voice devoid of any defensiveness. "I'm a licensed attorney who specialized in civil rights law before being elected to Congress. I earned my law degree from the University of Houston and have been practicing law for over a decade. I'm curious," she added, a subtle smile playing on her lips, turning the tables. "What are your legal qualifications?" Morgan bristled visibly at having the question turned back on him, his cheeks flushing slightly. "I'm a journalist, Congresswoman," he retorted, his voice rising. "I ask the questions here, not you." "Of course," Crockett replied with a slight, knowing smile. "I just wanted to establish the credentials of the person questioning my qualifications." The exchange was becoming increasingly tense, a palpable shift in control. Morgan's producers, through his earpiece, were likely frantically encouraging him to regain the initiative, to dominate the conversation as he usually did. This urgency undoubtedly fueled his next, more aggressive line of attack. "Let's talk about some specific concerns that have been raised about your conduct," Morgan said, pulling out a folder of papers, a prop, to lend weight to his allegations. "There are questions about your financial disclosures, your relationship with certain lobbyists, and whether you've been entirely transparent with your constituents about your background. This was the precise moment Crockett had been waiting for. Morgan was moving from legitimate, if aggressive, criticism into the dangerous territory of false factual claims, exactly what her entire legal case was built on. "That's interesting, Piers," she said, her voice remaining steady, but with a new, razor-sharp edge that few caught at first. "Could you be more specific about these alleged concerns? Because I've been completely transparent with all my financial disclosures. I don't take money from lobbyists, and my background is a matter of public record." Morgan sensed he had found a weakness, a chink in her armor, and pressed harder, confidently leaning into his fabricated narrative. "Well, there have been reports suggesting that your law degree credentials have been questioned, that you're under investigation by congressional ethics committees, and that you have financial conflicts of interest that you haven't disclosed to voters." The studio fell utterly silent. These weren't vague insinuations anymore. These were specific factual claims that could be proven true or false, and Crockett knew with chilling certainty that they were entirely false. "Piers," she said, her voice now taking on the chillingly precise, unyielding tone she used when cross-examining hostile witnesses in congressional hearings, "I need you to be very careful about what you're saying right now." Her eyes locked onto his, unwavering. "Are you stating as fact that my law degree has been questioned? Are you claiming that I'm under congressional ethics investigation? Are you asserting that I have undisclosed financial conflicts?" Morgan, sensing he had rattled her, or perhaps mistaking her precision for defensiveness, doubled down. "These are concerns that have been raised by credible sources," he asserted, puffing his chest slightly. "Yes, the American people deserve to know if their representatives are being honest with them." "And what are these credible sources, Piers?" Crockett pressed, her voice gaining power. Morgan waved his hand dismissively, his face already showing a flicker of irritation. "Oh, I'm not going to reveal my sources, obviously," he scoffed, "but these are serious allegations that deserve investigation." That's when Crockett delivered the first verbal blow that would signal to any astute observer that Morgan was in serious, serious trouble. "Piers, you've just made several specific false statements about me on live television," she declared, her voice firm and authoritative. "My law degree has never been questioned by any credible source. I am not under investigation by any congressional ethics committee. I have no undisclosed financial conflicts of interest." She leaned forward, her prosecutor instincts fully engaged, a predatory calm settling over her. "More importantly," she continued, her voice low and impactful, "I believe you know these statements are false." Morgan's confidence, built on years of aggressive interviewing, was beginning to crack. A flicker of unease crossed his face. "Congresswoman, I stand by my reporting," he stammered, his usual swagger diminished. "Your reporting?" Crockett interrupted, something she rarely did, a clear sign of her controlled fury. "Piers, you haven't done any reporting. You've repeated false claims without verification, ignored evidence that contradicts those claims, and are now doubling down on lies on live television." The atmosphere in the studio had shifted dramatically. What had started as Morgan's typical aggressive interview style had become something much more serious, far beyond mere political debate. Legal experts watching around the globe would later note that this was the precise moment when standard media criticism unequivocally crossed into potential defamation territory. Morgan tried desperately to regain control, his eyes darting towards the camera. "Now hold on just a minute." "No, Piers, you hold on," Crockett said, her voice rising with a righteous, controlled anger that filled the studio. "For months, you've been making false statements about me on this show. You've questioned my qualifications, my integrity, and my honesty without any factual basis. You've created a pattern of defamatory content that has damaged my reputation and potentially interfered with my ability to do my job." She reached into her briefcase again, her movement deliberate and ominous, and the camera caught the motion, signaling to viewers that something was coming. "You want to talk about accountability?" she challenged, her voice resonating with power. Let's talk about your accountability for the lies you've been spreading." Morgan was clearly flustered now, his usual composed demeanor cracking under the intense pressure of her gaze and words. He wiped a hand across his forehead. "Congresswoman, you're being overly sensitive. This is legitimate journalism." "Legitimate journalism," Crockett's voice was now commanding the entire studio, silencing any whispers. "Piers, let me tell you what legitimate journalism looks like. It involves fact-checking. It involves giving people a chance to respond to allegations before you broadcast them. It involves correcting errors when they're pointed out to you." She pulled out a thick folder of documents, a physical manifestation of her meticulous preparation. "I have here transcripts of every false statement you've made about me over the past 6 months. I have emails from your production team that show you were given evidence contradicting these claims. I have documentation proving that every single allegation you've made tonight is factually false." The tension in the studio was now electric, suffocating. Morgan's producers, unseen but frantically communicating through their earpieces, were trying desperately to figure out how to handle what was quickly becoming a legal nightmare unfolding live on television. "Furthermore," Crockett continued, her voice unwavering, "I have evidence that you made these statements with actual malice, meaning you either knew they were false or acted with reckless disregard for their truth or falsity." This was the legal nail in his coffin, the direct evidence of intent. Morgan tried one last time to regain control, his voice a strained whisper. "Congresswoman, you're obviously upset, but threatening legal action on my show is hardly appropriate." "I'm not threatening legal action, Piers," Crockett said, her voice chillingly calm, as she reached into her briefcase one final time, a theatrical flourish that sealed his fate. "I'm taking it." With the stage now set and Piers Morgan expertly maneuvered into a corner of his own making, prepare for the dramatic climax where Jasmine Crockett delivers the ultimate jaw-dropping blow. With the stage now set and Piers Morgan expertly maneuvered into a corner of his own making, prepare for the dramatic climax where Jasmine Crockett delivers the ultimate jaw-dropping blow. That's when she pulled out the legal document that would change everything. The moment of truth had arrived, and Piers Morgan, the self-proclaimed master of confrontation, had no idea what was about to hit him. The instant Jasmine Crockett placed the legal document on the table between them, the entire atmosphere of the studio changed, a palpable shift from aggressive debate to cold, hard legal reality. Piers Morgan's confident smirk evaporated as he stared at the official court papers, his brain visibly struggling to process what was happening. "Piers Stephen Morgan," Crockett said, her voice now taking on the formal, deliberate tone of someone who had served countless legal papers before, a practiced solemnity that underscored the gravity of the moment. "You are hereby served with a complaint filed in the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York, Case number 24, CV847, Jasmine Crockett versus Piers Morgan and Talk TV." The camera, sensing the seismic shift, zoomed in tightly on Morgan's face, capturing every micro-expression of his transformation. He went from confident media personality to a man in utter, pure panic, a defendant cornered on his own show. His mouth opened and closed several times, desperately attempting to form words, but no sound came out. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity, but was actually only 4 seconds. It was an agonizing, deafening silence that amplified his humiliation. This can't be real," Morgan finally managed to stammer, his usual commanding presence completely shattered, his voice barely a whisper. "You can't just... on live television, this is absolutely real, Piers," Crockett replied, her voice steady, professional, and entirely in control. "And the fact that you're being served on live television is entirely appropriate, considering that's where you committed the defamation." She opened the legal document with a crisp motion and began reading from the first page, her words cutting through the stunned silence like a surgeon's scalpel. "The complaint alleges defamation per se, false light, invasion of privacy, and intentional interference with business relations. You've been making false statements about my professional qualifications, my ethical conduct, and my fitness for office. Morgan looked desperately toward his production booth, his eyes wide with a plea for rescue, as if his team could somehow save him from this unprecedented legal ambush. But his producers were equally stunned, frozen in disbelief, frantically making phone calls and trying to figure out how to handle what was instantly becoming an international incident, spiraling out of their control. "The damages sought are $50 million, Crockett continued, her voice clear and precise, delivering the crushing blow. "Plus punitive damages, plus injunctive relief requiring you to issue public corrections and retractions of your false statements." "$50 million? Morgan's voice cracked, a desperate squeak escaping him. That's absurd. You can't possibly... Actually..." Crockett interrupted him, her voice unwavering. "Piers, given your international audience and the repeated nature of your defamatory statements, our damages experts believe $50 million is quite conservative. Your show reaches millions of viewers across multiple platforms. You've damaged my reputation before an international audience." She pulled out another document, methodically, almost clinically, reading him the detailed list of his transgressions. "Let me read you some of the specific false statements listed in the complaint. On the 15th of October, you stated that I had faked my law degree credentials. That statement is demonstrably false, and I have my law school transcripts and bar admission records to prove it. On the 22nd of October, you claimed I was under investigation by congressional ethics committees. Also false. I have written statements from the House Ethics Committee confirming no such investigation exists. On the 3rd of November, you stated that I had financial conflicts of interest that I'm hiding from voters. False again. My financial disclosures are public record and show no conflicts whatsoever." With each false statement she cited, Morgan seemed to shrink further into his chair, his imposing presence diminishing with every word. The confident media personality who had built his career on aggressively attacking others was now being systematically destroyed by his own reckless words, dismantled piece by piece on his own show. "But here's what makes this case particularly strong," Crockett said, pulling out yet another incriminating document, the proof of his actual malice. "These emails from your production team show that you were provided with evidence contradicting each of these claims before you made them." She held up the printed emails for the camera to see undeniable proof. "On the 12th of October, 3 days before you claimed I had faked my credentials, your producer, Sarah Mitchell, emailed my office asking about my educational background. My staff responded with copies of my law degree, my bar admission, and my academic transcripts. On the 20th of October, 2 days before you claimed I was under ethics investigation, your team again contacted my office asking about any pending investigations. My chief of staff explicitly told them no such investigations existed and offered to provide documentation. On the 1st of November, your team asked about my financial disclosures. We provided them with links to my public filings and offered to walk them through any questions they had." She sat back, letting the damning implications sink in, allowing the weight of the undeniable truth to crush Morgan. "So you weren't just reckless with the truth, Piers," she concluded, her voice sharp with condemnation. "You were deliberately ignoring evidence that contradicted the false narrative you wanted to create." Morgan was now visibly sweating under the bright studio lights, his composure completely gone. "Congresswoman," he stammered, attempting to recover some dignity, "surely we can discuss this perhaps off camera." "Oh no, Piers," Crockett replied with a chillingly slight smile, denying him any reprieve. "You wanted to conduct your character assassination on live television. It's only fitting that you face the consequences in the same forum." She pulled out another section of the lawsuit, refusing to let up. "The complaint also details the harm you've caused to my reputation and my ability to do my job. Since your false statements began, I've received thousands of hostile emails and phone calls from people who believed your lies. I've had to hire additional security because of threats from people who saw your show. My staff has spent countless hours responding to media inquiries based on your false claims. Congressional colleagues have even questioned me about investigations that don't exist." Morgan was now gripping the arms of his chair, looking like a man watching his entire career evaporate in real time, the weight of his actions crushing him. This is unprecedented," he choked out. "You can't just sue someone for doing their job as a journalist." "That's exactly the point, Piers," Crockett shot back, her voice now filled with the righteous indignation of a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. "You weren't doing your job as a journalist. Journalists check facts, journalists verify information, journalists issue corrections when they get things wrong." She gestured toward the camera, making it clear this message was for everyone watching. "What you did was create entertainment by spreading lies about an elected official. That's not journalism, that's defamation." The legal papers rustled as she flipped to another page, laying out the full scope of her demands. "The complaint also seeks injunctive relief. If we prevail, you'll be required to issue public retractions of all your false statements, prominently displayed on your show and social media platforms. You'll also be prohibited from making any further false statements about me, with violations subject to contempt of court proceedings." Morgan tried one last, desperate gambit, a final, futile attempt to dismiss the gravity of the situation. "This is clearly a publicity stunt, Congresswoman. You're just trying to generate headlines." "A publicity stunt?" Crockett's voice rose, now with genuine, unbridled anger. "Piers, I'm a sitting member of Congress. I don't need publicity stunts. What I need is for media personalities to stop lying about me with impunity." She stood up from her chair, a powerful, deliberate move that made Morgan, still slumped in his seat, look even smaller by comparison, his authority utterly diminished. "This lawsuit isn't about publicity, it's about accountability. For too long, people like you have hidden behind claims of journalism while spreading lies and destroying reputations. The days of consequence-free defamation are over," she declared, pointing directly at Morgan, her finger a metaphorical sword. "If you want to criticize my policies, my voting record, or my positions, that's fair game. That's democracy. But when you lie about my qualifications, my integrity, and my fitness for office, that's not journalism. That's defamation. And now you're going to pay for it." The studio was dead silent, save for the almost imperceptible hum of the cameras, capturing every agonizing second. Morgan sat frozen, the legal papers in front of him, representing what could be the definitive end of his high-flying media career. "The process server is standing by outside your studio," Crockett announced, her voice returning to a formal, almost clinical tone. "But since we're live on television, service is complete. You've been officially served, Mr. Morgan." She gathered her documents, the sound of papers rustling filling the silence, and stood to leave, her mission accomplished. "Your lawyers will want to review the complaint carefully," she added, a final, cutting piece of advice. "Discovery begins in 30 days, and I look forward to deposing you under oath about your reckless disregard for the truth." As she headed toward the studio exit, she turned back one final time, delivering a parting shot that echoed through the stunned silence. "Oh, and Piers," she said, a final, withering look. "Next time you want to destroy someone's reputation, make sure you have your facts straight. In America, we have laws against what you've been doing, and now you're going to learn about them the hard way." The camera stayed focused on Morgan's stunned, pale face as Crockett calmly walked out of the studio, leaving behind one of the most devastating legal ambushes in television history. The silence stretched for nearly 10 agonizing seconds before Morgan finally managed to stammer something about going to commercial break. But it was far too late. The damage was done, the lawsuit was officially filed, and the entire shocking exchange had been broadcast live to millions of viewers around the world. Within minutes, clips of Morgan's raw, panicked reaction would be racing across social media, turning his very public humiliation into a global viral phenomenon. The immediate aftermath of Jasmine Crockett's live television legal ambush of Piers Morgan was unlike anything the media world had ever witnessed. Within minutes of the broadcast ending, social media exploded with clips, reactions, and analysis that would dominate news cycles for weeks, if not months. The single most viral moment was a raw, unfiltered 30-second clip showing Morgan's face cycling through shock, disbelief, and pure, unadulterated panic as Crockett served him with the lawsuit papers. That single video was viewed over 150 million times across all platforms within the first 72 hours, cementing its place as one of the most watched political moments in social media history. TikTok users immediately began creating reaction videos and hilarious remixes, turning Morgan's downfall into a meme-worthy event. The audio of Crockett saying, "You've been officially served, Mr. Morgan," became the ubiquitous soundtrack for thousands upon thousands of videos celebrating moments of justice and accountability, from personal triumphs to comedic confrontations. The hashtag number sign served live on TV accumulated over 50 million views in the first week alone, a testament to the immense public engagement. Twitter, now known as X, was in complete meltdown mode. The hashtag number Piers Morgan served trended globally for 3 straight days, generating an astonishing over 8.2 million tweets. The platform had to add additional server capacity to handle the unprecedented traffic surge as users shared clips, created memes, and unleashed a torrent of commentary about the unprecedented legal ambush. The immediate reaction from legal experts was swift and overwhelmingly supportive of Crockett's audacious, yet meticulously planned, approach. Harvard law professor Lawrence Tribe, a renowned constitutional scholar, famously tweeted, "This is how you handle media defamation in the digital age, with preparation, precision, and public accountability." His tweet was retweeted over 200,000 times, amplifying its message globally. CNN was the first major network to immediately recognize the global significance of what had just happened. They instantly went to breaking news coverage, with Anderson Cooper leading analysis that would continue for hours. "Ladies and gentlemen," Cooper announced with a solemn tone, "we may have just witnessed the most significant moment in media accountability in decades." The network brought in panels of esteemed legal experts, media scholars, and political analysts who were unanimous in their assessment. This was a watershed moment that would fundamentally change how media personalities approached their coverage of public figures, forever altering the landscape of broadcast journalism. BBC News picked up the story within hours, with their legal correspondent noting that this represented a new era of real-time legal accountability in the social media age, where actions had immediate and public consequences. The story led their evening news broadcast and was swiftly picked up by media outlets across Europe, Asia, and Australia, becoming a truly global headline. Fox News found themselves in the unusual, almost awkward position of covering a story that directly implicated their broader industry and, in some ways, their own journalistic practices. While some hosts tried to defend Morgan as a fellow media personality, others, recognizing the legal gravity, acknowledged that if Crockett's allegations were true, Morgan had indeed crossed serious legal lines that could not be uncrossed. MSNBC dedicated their entire evening lineup to analyzing the confrontation. Rachel Maddow, with her characteristic depth, spent her full hour breaking down the legal implications, calling it a masterclass in how to use the law to fight back against media lies, a blueprint for future action. Joy Reid focused on the broader critical implications for how women of color are often treated by international media, highlighting the intersection of race, gender, and power in the confrontation. The late-night comedy shows, naturally, had an absolute field day, finding endless material in Morgan's public meltdown. Stephen Colbert's opening monologue featured a hilarious split screen showing Morgan's confident pre-lawsuit demeanor versus his deer-in-headlights expression immediately afterward. "You could literally watch his net worth decrease in real time," Colbert joked, perfectly encapsulating the immediate financial damage. Jimmy Kimmel created a segment called "You've Been Served," featuring dramatic reenactments of famous legal moments in television history. The bit hilariously ended with an actor playing Crockett, serving papers to various other media personalities who had been accused of spreading false information, a clear nod to the potential ripple effect. Trevor Noah dedicated 15 minutes to breaking down Crockett's brilliant legal strategy, explaining defamation law to his audience while showing clips of Morgan's visible panic. "This is what happens when a prosecutor goes up against a pundit," Noah concluded succinctly. "She came with receipts. He came with rumors." Saturday Night Live announced they would be doing a special cold open featuring the confrontation, with cast member Ego Nwodim reprising her role as Crockett and a guest host playing a terrified Morgan. The sketch became one of SNL's most watched segments of the season, solidifying the event's place in pop culture. The international media reaction was particularly significant, demonstrating the global reach of the event. British newspapers, which had largely supported Morgan throughout his often controversial career, found themselves in the unprecedented position of having to cover his potential legal downfall. The Guardian ran a scathing editorial about the consequences of tabloid tactics in the digital, social media age. The Times of London, traditionally more conservative, published an analysis piece suggesting that Morgan's approach represented everything wrong with modern media culture, and that Crockett's lawsuit might force long overdue accountability in the industry, finally holding the powerful accountable. Legal experts around the world immediately began analyzing the case as a potential template for holding media personalities accountable for false statements, a new blueprint for justice. Oxford University's Reuters Institute announced they would be conducting a comprehensive study of the case and its profound implications for press freedom and, crucially, accountability. The financial implications for Morgan and Talk TV became apparent almost immediately, a harsh, undeniable reality. The network's stock price dropped a staggering 12% in after-hours trading as investors quickly realized the monumental potential liability of a $50 million lawsuit. Several major advertisers, wary of being associated with such a controversy, announced they were reviewing their relationships with the network pending the outcome of the lawsuit, threatening further financial woes. Morgan's personal brand, which he had spent decades meticulously building and cultivating, suffered immediate and severe damage. His social media following plummeted by over 500,000 accounts in the first week alone, a stark digital reflection of his plummeting popularity. Several lucrative speaking engagements were abruptly cancelled, and a planned book deal, a cornerstone of his media empire, was reportedly put on hold indefinitely, his career prospects dimming rapidly. Talk TV found themselves in an unprecedented crisis mode. Emergency board meetings were called, and sources close to the network reported heated discussions about whether to stand by their embattled host or distance themselves from him to mitigate the damage. The lawsuit named both Morgan personally and the network corporately, meaning Talk TV could be held liable for the full $50 million in damages, a sum that threatened their very existence. The reaction from other media personalities was mixed but telling. Many privately supported Crockett's decisive actions while being careful not to criticize Morgan publicly for fear of similar repercussions. However, several prominent journalists, recognizing the severe implications for their own profession, noted that the case starkly highlighted the critical need for better fact-checking and more rigorous verification procedures in the digital media age, a wake-up call for the entire industry. For Crockett herself, the response was overwhelmingly positive, a wave of support unlike anything she had experienced. Her congressional office reported receiving over 300,000 emails, calls, and social media messages in the first week after the lawsuit was filed, an astounding 97% of them overwhelmingly supportive. Her staff had to bring in additional volunteers just to handle the sheer volume of positive feedback, a testament to how deeply her actions resonated with the public. Legal scholars immediately began analyzing what they termed the Crockett Doctrine, the groundbreaking idea that public figures could strategically use legal action, not just angry tweets, to combat systematic media defamation. Several prestigious law schools announced they would be adding the case to their curricula on media law and defamation, making it required reading for future legal minds. The lawsuit itself became a powerful model for other public figures who had been subjected to relentless media lies. Within just 2 weeks, 3 other politicians, inspired by Crockett's success, they were filing similar lawsuits against media personalities who had made false statements about them, signaling a new era of legal pushback. Campaign fundraising websites saw unprecedented activity as small dollar donors rallied to support candidates who had praised Crockett's decisive action. ActBlue, a prominent fundraising platform, reported one of its highest single-day fundraising totals of the entire year, with many donations including explicit messages like, for more representatives who fight back against media lies, demonstrating a clear public appetite for accountability. International law firms began reaching out to Crockett's legal team, eager to understand the strategy and potentially replicate it in other jurisdictions, seeing it as a global precedent. The case was cited in legal briefs in the UK, Australia, and Canada as a compelling example of effective media accountability, proving its universal relevance. The academic world embraced the confrontation as a pivotal case study in effective legal strategy and media relations. Harvard Kennedy School announced they would be offering a special seminar on legal accountability in the digital media age, based largely on Crockett's groundbreaking approach. Corporate America took immediate notice as well. Several major companies, recognizing the profound implications for reputation management, invited Crockett to speak at conferences about accountability, strategic communication, and navigating media misinformation. Her speaking fees quickly reached six figures, though. In a testament to her commitment, she continued to donate most of the money to organizations fighting media misinformation. Now prepare to witness the long-term seismic shifts this one pivotal moment created, forever reshaping the landscapes of both media and politics around the world. Now prepare to witness the long-term seismic shifts this one pivotal moment created, forever reshaping the landscapes of both media and politics around the world. The long-term implications for media law became clearer and more profound as legal experts continued to analyze the case. If Crockett prevailed, it would establish new and robust precedents for holding media personalities accountable for false statements, potentially changing how television hosts and online commentators approached their coverage of public figures forever. The case also highlighted the increasingly global nature of modern media and the complex jurisdictional complications that arise when British broadcasters, like Morgan, make defamatory statements about American politicians to international audiences. Legal experts noted that the jurisdictional questions alone could reshape how international media operates, forcing a re-evaluation of legal boundaries in a borderless digital world. 3 months after the lawsuit was filed, Morgan's legal team filed a motion to dismiss, arguing that his statements were protected opinion rather than actionable fact. However, Crockett's team responded with a devastating brief that included damning audio recordings of Morgan's internal production meetings, where he allegedly acknowledged that some of his claims were probably not true, but were good television. This was the smoking gun, undeniable proof of actual malice. The discovery phase of the lawsuit revealed even more internal talk TV communications that showed network executives knew many of Morgan's claims about Crockett were false, but brazenly encouraged him to continue making them for ratings purposes, valuing viewership over truth. These shocking revelations led to additional litigation and regulatory investigations in the UK, extending the fallout far beyond the initial lawsuit. Public opinion polling showed that the lawsuit had fundamentally changed how Americans viewed media accountability. A survey conducted 6 months after the lawsuit found that a staggering 78% of respondents supported legal action against media personalities who spread false information about public figures, a clear mandate for stricter oversight. Perhaps most significantly, the case seemed to mark a decisive turning point in how public figures approached media criticism. Rather than simply complaining about fake news, politicians and other public figures began actively following Crockett's meticulously documented model of legal accountability, empowering themselves with the tools to fight back. The entertainment industry took immediate notice as well. Netflix announced plans for a compelling documentary about the confrontation and its far-reaching aftermath, recognizing its inherent drama and public interest. Several screenwriters began developing fictional works inspired by the powerful David versus Goliath narrative of a congresswoman taking down an international media personality, cementing its place in popular culture. Universities around the world, recognizing the profound impact of her strategy, invited Crockett to speak about media accountability and the strategic use of legal tools to combat misinformation. Her appearance at Oxford University drew over 4,000 attendees, making it one of the most popular guest lectures in recent memory, a testament to her influence. The story of how a 33-year-old congresswoman used her legal expertise to publicly humiliate and financially devastate a prominent media personality, became more than just a viral moment. It became a template for holding the most powerful figures in media accountable in the digital age. As the first-year anniversary of the lawsuit approached, its impact on both media and politics had become undeniable and irreversible. Morgan's career never recovered from the devastating blow. With the lawsuit ultimately costing him his show and irrevocably damaging his reputation, Talk TV settled for an undisclosed sum reported to be in the tens of millions, along with a humiliating public apology and retraction, a complete surrender. Crockett, meanwhile, had firmly established herself as one of the most effective and formidable politicians of her generation, demonstrating beyond doubt that thorough preparation and strategic thinking could still triumph over media bullying and character assassination, even on the biggest stages. The case became required reading in journalism schools, law schools, and political science programs across the world, a foundational text for understanding modern media dynamics. It demonstrated unequivocally that in an age of pervasive social media and instant global communication, the consequences of irresponsible journalism could be swift, severe, and very public. For millions of Americans who had lost faith in the accountability of media institutions, Jasmine Crockett's legal destruction of Piers Morgan proved that sometimes, against all odds, justice still prevails when preparation meets courage and unyielding facts confront blatant lies. The broader implications extended far beyond just media accountability. The case became a potent symbol of how traditional power structures, once thought untouchable, could be successfully challenged by those who combined legal expertise with strategic thinking, a true revolution in political engagement. Political science professors began teaching the Crockett method as an inspiring example of how modern politicians could effectively fight back against institutional bias and widespread misinformation, empowering a new generation of leaders. The international legal community took particular interest in how the case navigated the complex intersection of American defamation law and British broadcasting standards, a groundbreaking legal precedent. Several countries, inspired by the outcome, began reviewing their own media accountability laws, with some directly citing the Crockett case as clear justification for stronger protections against false statements, ensuring better journalistic standards globally. Women's rights organizations celebrated the case as a defining moment for female empowerment in the face of pervasive media bullying, a beacon of hope and strength. The National Organization for Women presented Crockett with their highest honor, noting that her approach provided a clear roadmap for other women facing similar, often vicious, attacks from powerful media figures, a testament to her pioneering spirit. The case also had significant implications for how social media platforms handled defamatory content. Several major platforms updated their policies regarding false statements about public figures, with some pointing directly to the Crockett lawsuit as undeniable evidence that such content could now result in serious legal consequences, forcing platforms to take greater responsibility. Legal education itself was transformed by the case. Law schools began requiring students to meticulously study the strategic elements of Crockett's approach, the meticulous documentation, the crucial choice of jurisdiction, the impeccable timing of service, and the brilliant use of public pressure to maximize impact. The case became a model for what legal scholars now call transparency litigation, using the legal system not just to win damages but to expose wrongdoing to overwhelming public scrutiny, shining a light on previously hidden abuses. The media industry itself began implementing profound changes in direct response to the case. Several major networks announced stringent new fact-checking procedures specifically for content about public figures, a direct consequence of the legal fallout. Industry associations developed robust new guidelines for hosts and producers, explicitly outlining the severe legal risks of making unverified claims about elected officials, fostering a culture of greater responsibility. Training programs for media personalities began, now including mandatory sessions on defamation law, with many using clips from the Crockett-Morgan confrontation as stark examples of how quickly careers could be utterly destroyed by reckless, unfounded statements. Insurance companies, recognizing the newfound risks, began requiring media personalities to undergo legal training before coverage would even be provided, an unprecedented step. The psychological impact on other media figures was significant and far-reaching. Sources within various networks reported that hosts were becoming much more cautious about making personal attacks on politicians, particularly those with strong legal backgrounds and newfound respect for legal boundaries. The Crockett effect became shorthand for the severe career risk of attacking someone who might fight back with unparalleled legal expertise and a strategic mind. Political campaigns began actively recruiting candidates with strong legal backgrounds, seeing the undeniable strategic advantage of having representatives who could deftly defend themselves against aggressive, often false, media attacks. The success of Crockett's approach led to what some observers called the lawyer-politician renaissance, with legal professionals being actively courted for political office, reshaping the very demographics of government. The case also profoundly influenced how congressional hearings were conducted. Other members of Congress, inspired by Crockett's mastery, began adopting her methodical, evidence-based approach to questioning witnesses, leading to what observers called a new golden age of congressional oversight, characterized by precision and factual rigor. International relations were affected as well, with the case creating noticeable tension between American and British media establishments. Some British commentators complained that American politicians were now using lawfare to silence legitimate criticism, while American legal experts argued that the case simply held British broadcasters to the same stringent standards as domestic media, ensuring fairness across borders. The financial settlements and legal precedents established by the case led to a broader re-evaluation of how media companies calculated the risks and rewards of producing controversial content. Several high-profile media personalities reportedly had their contracts restructured to include personal liability clauses for defamatory statements, a clear sign of the industry's new, cautious approach. Academic research flourished around the case, with scholars from fields ranging from communications to political science to law, producing hundreds of papers analyzing various aspects of the confrontation and its profound aftermath. The case quickly became one of the most studied media events of the entire decade, a benchmark for understanding modern media accountability, media accountability, media accountability, media accountability, media accountability.